7-5, World Conflict. Number 27, describe the main causes of World War I. What was the spark that set off this ticking time bomb? Well, the main causes of World War I were militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. And the spark that set off the time bomb was the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. That's when all those different forces collided. Number 28, how did America come to enter World War I? Well, the United States was trying to stay out of World War I as much as possible. They were kind of sending some aid over there, and I think that it's important that you understand that the Germans probably figured that out. I don't know if it intentionally was perceived that we should get America involved in the war, but they did get involved, partly because of the sinking of the Lusitania, partly because of the sinking of other ships that were carrying supplies and American passengers, and partly because of the Zimmerman telegram that was intercepted by the British. Number 29, how did the Industrial Revolution impact the death toll during World War II? Well, there was a much higher death toll because of the new machines and new weapons that were created. Mustard gas, trench warfare, machine guns, tanks, all these different things that were used during World War I caused catastrophic death toll. Number 30, what was the Treaty of Versailles and how did it impact Germany after World War I? Well, the Treaty of Versailles was a treaty that was signed as a result of World War I, and the whole way that it impacted Germany was that the Germans were forced to give up a lot of their land. The Germans had to pay huge amounts of reparations. They wanted to cripple Germany. They split it into different pieces. And remember, if you remember, Woodrow Wilson's peace was a much more positive peace plan, the 14 points, but the Allies didn't want to have any part of that. They wanted revenge. So the point of that treaty was really to get revenge on Germany and any of the allies that Germany had. Number 31, what were some of the causes of the worldwide depression after the boom of the 20s? Well, the Great Depression was caused by lots of different factors. The Roaring '20s, everybody was spending carelessly, building up credit, buying stocks on margin, lots and lots of different factors. Banks began to close. Then the stock market crashed in 1929 on October 29th. It was just a horrible, horrible time that resulted from a lot of poor planning on the government's part and did not have an established Federal Reserve, did not have an established way of keeping track of all the money. In Germany, you have huge inflations, thousands and thousands of marks being used for loaves of bread, huge amounts of money being spent, and this inflation just cripples the economy. Number 32, describe what the New Deal was designed to do and what it did for America. Well, the New Deal was designed to get America out of the Great Depression. What did it actually do? It started all these new programs. It started all these wonderful, wonderful projects that got people back to work. Did it pull America out of the Depression? No. This was Franklin Roosevelt's plan. The actual event that pulled us out of the Depression was World War II, the huge government spending and employment rate that really skyrocketed as a result of America getting involved in World War II. 33, why did Japan wish to expand its empire? What problems was it facing? Well, Japan didn't have the land it needed and the raw materials it needed, and very similarly to all the other countries during the age of imperialism, they were having a hard time during the Depression. Japan decided to expand its empire. They decided that it was the best way to expand the empire was just to go and tap into native countries' resources, neighboring countries' resources, and get what they needed at that point. So Japan was facing lots and lots of issues during the Great Depression, and just like everybody else, they wanted to expand their empires and continue to build. Number 34, what were the major causes of World War II? If we remember from class, we talked about HALT. Hitler, the policy of appeasement, the failure of the League of Nations, and the Treaty of Versailles. Okay? Treaty of Versailles, among other things, I mean, this was something that really, really got the Germans angry and fired up folks. Hitler was tapping into that anger, and he was being fueled by that anger. The fact that Britain and France weren't doing anything about it, and America was being isolated during this time period, didn't help matters either. The policy of appeasement, or giving Hitler what he wanted, really didn't work. And the League of Nations failing, because of all its inadequacies and all its holes and all the things that it couldn't do, that was a problem as well. 35, what were the effects or significant events of World War II? Well, if you look in your chapter on World War II, you can see lots of significant events, primarily on your T2K. So review that when you're going through to review for your exam. I mean, we talked about the Battle of the Bulge, we talked about Guadalcanal, talked about the Pacific Theater, the Atlantic Theater, Pearl Harbor, all these different events that were important. What got America involved was Pearl Harbor. What got everybody else involved at the outset of the war, at the beginning, was the invasion of Poland by Hitler and by Stalin's forces. Remember, they were on the same side until Stalin betrayed him. They had signed the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, and then Hitler stabbed Stalin in the back, as he likes to do with all of his quote-unquote friends. Number 36, compare and contrast Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin as totalitarian leaders. What did each of these guys want? How did they rise to power, and how did they fall? Or did they? Well, Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin are, we just call them the big three under that umbrella of totalitarianism. Hitler is a prime example of Nazism, which is a form of fascism. Mussolini is a fascist leader, so that's why Hitler and Mussolini, I guess, were so tight. Mussolini had the black shirts, Hitler had the brown shirts. Stalin is kind of the oddball in that group. He was a communist. And Hitler, it's no secret that Hitler did not like or trust communists. So it's kind of like he was playing all sides. Was Hitler a charismatic leader? Yes. Was he a trustworthy person? Probably not. Number 37, what effect did the worldwide depression have on totalitarianism rising as a form of government prior to World War II? Totalitarianism rose because of the depression. The time was right for these leaders. We needed people to rise to power that were willing to take the reins and run with them. And during the era of totalitarianism, these people presented themselves in the form of Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, Tojo, different leaders all around the world that just started to take the reins and say, this is the way we're going, because there was so much chaos going on during the Depression. And finally, what was the Holocaust? What were the results? How were those perpetrated punished? Those that perpetrated this atrocity punished. Holocaust was a systematic genocide of 6 million Jews and 5 million others in Europe from the years 1933 to 1945. The Holocaust is probably one of the darkest pages in the history book, if you think about the way that we are as human beings, and it's a very sad shadow on our human story. The results of the Holocaust were untold millions of lives that could have been in this world, but because of the silencing hand of the Nazi Party and other perpetrators in Europe, those lives will never be. Who perpetrated this? Well, there were lots of Nazi leaders that did, and lots of people who did, and lots who stood by as bystanders. But the perpetrators were tried in the Nuremberg trials, 1945, and several of them were put on trial, several were executed, some committed suicide, and for the most part, we don't really feel that justice was done, but they were trying to get the big folks who were involved in the Holocaust, the higher-ups. So it's important that you understand what happened there, and that you remember to take it to heart so that we may never forget what happened to those folks, those millions and millions of innocent lives that were lost. So that wraps up 7-5, and as always, have a nice afternoon.